Okay, so the special letter parts is for all the different notations and everything you can put into a letter. So here we go. Here is a basic letter that same one we worked on before, and I'm going to go through how it should all work out for you. So to begin with your line spacing, you should check your line spacing. And your line spacing should be after at 8 points, multiple at 1.8. This can also be 10 and 1.10, but the new words, the 2019 spacing is points after is 8 and line spacing is multiple at 1.08. So mine is set to the correct spacing, so I'm just going to say okay. So now we begin, just like every letter, with 3 enters. So 1, 2, so we go 1, 2, 3. Now, so you start your letter with 3 enters. So this needs to come up. So now we can have, like any letter, our date is the first thing. So you start your letter with your current date. So whatever today's date is. The next thing you're going to put into a letter is going to be the mailing notation. So whenever you have to have a special delivery, airmail, confidential, anything that's a mailing notation, meaning it should also go on to the envelope itself, then you're going to put it right after the date. So the spacing for all of these remains at full spacing where it's 1.8 and the line spacing is still there. And then we get into the address. So one space after the special notation for the mailing notation, one enter, sorry, not space, enter after, and you can begin your address. So when you're doing your address, as we discussed before, you can either select your address and go remove line spacing for your first 2 rows, or you can use the control enter, which will bring it together. So right now I have the line spacing removed from the address, so that's well laid out. So then we can move into the next line. So then we get into the reference and subject lines, and as well as the salutation. So this module talks about the attention line. Well, your attention line is pretty much your dear line. So your attention and dear line can be pretty much substituted out for each other. So if it's a dear and a salutation, it means that it's addressing a specific person or the company manager or something. If it's an attention line, it's more vague. So it would be dear, it would just say ladies and gentlemen or to whom it may concern, or then it would be just considered an attention line because it's just vague. So before our attention line, we have the reference line. So this is your reference line right here, and this is used to direct the reader to the source document or file. So this is what you're referring to in this letter. So lots of times you would say this would be a invoice number or an order number or um, if you're updating policies, it would say regarding policy 1.2.7 or so it's generally referring to something very specific that you're going to be talking about in this meeting. So right now this one just says Chamber of Commerce meeting, but that one's not specific enough for a reference letter. So we should have that say if it was January 11th 2003 minutes. So now you're referring to a specific document that, oh, 2023. Not sure if I just lost 20 years there or not, but 2023. So now you're referring to something very specific. So remember that a reference line generally refers you to another document. So it's a referral. Then we do our attention or salutation, full spacing again. And then we move down into our, so this right here is our subject line. So now you're into your subject line, and the subject just refers to a very brief what you're going to talk about in this meeting. So, it could be missing items or um, to do tasks because we're referring to minutes. So, lots of times minutes will finish with to do items. So, your subject line refers to what the body of the letter is going to talk about, and your reference line refers to another document or something very specific in your letter. So now we're going to go into the body of the letter, which we have here. And the line spacing is just basic word wrap. So when word you type, you never hit enter at the end of each line. That would make your letter look like it was double spaced. So these would be the enters at the end of a line, which is we never do. I do see it occasionally, but you never hit enter at the end of the line. You let Word wrap it itself. So if Word wraps it itself, it's going to remove the line spacing within the paragraph. And then when you hit enter to your next paragraph, your line spacing will show up. And that's how come you get that little gap between each paragraph. So you also have, right now, we're using mixed punctuation in this letter. So we have a colon after our salutation, and we have a comma after our closing, after our sincerely. If we wanted open punctuation is nothing. So you'd use no colon and you would use no comma. And normally a block letter is done with open punctuation. So now we move on into our closing, and this is where it can get a little bit busier because there's lots of things you can add into the closing. So we're going to look at sincerely, and then we make sure you include enough space for a handwritten signature. So this is 2 enters. That's usually enough with the line spacing on. Sometimes you can use 3. Then we're going to sign our letter with the first name, last name, and the title of whoever the letter is from. If it's from you, you sign your name. And if it's from you, you do not need to add initials. If it's from your boss or somebody else in your organization, then you sign their name and you have to include your initials. Initials are lowercase and the spacing is on full spacing again. Then we get into the enclosure. Enclosure comes after the initials, and this is where we would include or list everything that is enclosed in the letter. So right now we have an enclosure with a colon, which means we are having a list. Colon generally means you're going to start a list. So because we have 2 items, we just hit tab over, and then we can use the shift enter to get to the next line with the spacing removed, and you can list both, and you would use the proper amount of tabs to line everything up into the same spot. So once here, and we needed 2 tabs here to line it up. So now that's a list. If you didn't have a list and you were just going to enclose one thing, actually this should have said enclosures. If we're listing more than one, it would say enclosures starting the comment. And without it, if we were just going to just say there is an enclosure and have nothing listed, we would just remove the colon and we would have nothing. This wouldn't be here. None of this. It would just say enclosure. So then you're going to hit enter again with your spacing still on, full spacing, and you're going to get into your copy line. So your copy line notation is going to be one lowercase c and a tab, and it would put the list of the person who you're sending it to. So if this is a letter that's going to 2 of your instructors, you would use copy, and then you would list your 2 people. And if it was just one person, it would just be the same. And if it was blind copy, which is so tricky for a lot of people, you need to make sure that the blind copy is only included on the letter of the person receiving the blind copy. They're the only ones who should know that they received a blind copy. That's the whole point of it being blind. It's a secret from everybody else who's getting the letter, and then and after everybody else's letter is printed and ready to go in the mail, then you would include your blind copy notation and you would print your one more letter for blind copy, and then you would have that one. So you would know that that letter is only going. There's no point to have a blind notation and list it onto the letter that you're sending a blind copy to somebody else. So if I'm sending this to if this was a complaint letter and I was complaining to this instructor and to this instructor about something that was happening in their class that I needed them to be aware of, and um, I wanted to also send a copy to the campus administrator, but I didn't want the instructors to know about it, then I can't include the blind copy on their letter or they're going to see it. They're going to know about it. So the blind copy is only on the letter and only printed on the person who's actually listed in the blind copy. And that is all of the notations for a letter. We're also going to look at creating an envelope today. So when we create an envelope, I'm going to remove this here because I don't want this to show up on my envelope. And I'm going to remove this here. So when you're creating an envelope, you're going to select the address, and then you're going to go into your mailings tab. Once you go into your mailings tab, you can see envelopes is right there. Click on your envelopes and you'll get the pop-up box. The envelopes and labels pop up. But because we selected the address is going to pop over already placed exactly where we need it. So by selecting the address, it eliminates you having to actually type the address in again. So then if you wanted to, you can put in your own return address here, or you can leave that out. And then when you're ready, you can just say add to document. And once you hit add to document and decrease the size so you can see, you're going to have your envelope is placed right above your letter. And there you have added the envelope to your letter. So now you can also add the special notations to the envelope. So when you add a special notation to an envelope, it's pretty much the same thing because the only thing you're really looking at adding is confidential. So if we had our return address here, let's just say we did. There, we'll stick in this one. Now, if we needed to put in confidential, so we're just going to move down to about the 1-inch mark. So we can put in just a couple enters that we need, and then we would just put in all caps, confidential. So here we have the confidential notation. And then if we wanted to add that it was an airmail or some other, if there was more than one type of notation that needed to go on, your airmail or express delivery or something specific like that would go right aligned. So you would just simply go back to your home tab, click your right align button, and then you would put in airmail. And why is it jumping? Oops. Airmail. So now you have your two notations on your letter. Your address is placed properly, exactly where it should be. And you have your return address, and you also have the mailing notations. So that would be how to add your letter, the envelope to your letter, and how you would not have to type your address by just selecting it within your letter. Now, the reason I deleted the information after this is because if it was there when I selected it, it also would have showed up right here because Word would just assume that that's all a part of your address. Okay, so that covers everything I want to talk about today for your letters and your envelopes and the special notations. So I'm going to end our recording and then we can chat and have any conversation or questions you want. Here we go.